Greetings and welcome back to the Davenant Academy's course, Ties That Bind. Today, we're going to dive into the idea of friendship. What is friendship? And this is one of the more important aspects of human relationships. We all need companions. We all need others around us that we can walk side by side with. And this question is something that in our society has been very confused at times, I think. We think of friendship, we have 1,000 or 2,000 Facebook friends. Are they really friends? What is the definition of friendship when you're talking about your Facebook friends? It seems pretty shallow, pretty insignificant compared to what friendship seems to demand that we ask of it. So when we think about friendship, what are the types of things that come to mind? Well, a few things like maybe things that you like to do for pleasure. You enjoy playing golf or going shopping or doing whatever hobby that you enjoy together with a friend. Those are some of the friendships that you have. Friendships that you have with coworkers at your workplace, in the business that you're a part of, even maybe business partners, people at the factory that you work alongside, those kinds of relationships. You have your friends at work, in workplace, friends that are useful in that you work together on a common goal at work or things. And then there's other friendships that go much deeper than this, the ones that you can tell your deepest secrets to, the ones that you can cry on their shoulder when you're struggling with something hard, and those kinds of friendships that run much more emotionally deep than what you would share maybe with some of the other kinds of friends. And maybe some of these all come together in the same person. Maybe you have that coworker, that co-laborer that you also love to do hobbies with and enjoy the pleasure of those things with, and that you can tell them about anything, and they are your support in that, and would be a great shoulder to cry on in hard times. So there's these different types of relationships though, and when we call somebody a friend, it can mean one or more of those things. What I want to dive into in exploring friendships today is I really want to just not so much downplay some of those, because we need all of those types of relationships, but I want to take a look at why we need some of the relationships that actually go much deeper than simply one of the first two, especially of those. So the scriptures have a lot to say regarding friendships, and we could dive into much of that, but I think I'm going to start first with just a few things that friendships are not merely. C.S. Lewis has a lot to say about friendships in a few different works, primarily the Four Loves. He talks a lot about friendships, and I'm going to read a little out of that in a moment. But before we go there, in his essay, The Inner Ring, he talks a little bit about what friendships are not in regard to this concept of the inner ring that he talks about. He talks about the inner ring being this kind of inside crowd. You may think of middle school, where there was this really popular kid and they only had their exclusive friend group, but everybody wanted to be their friend. And so everybody kind of sought to become friends with them somehow, but most of the time you're just outside of that ring looking in at this small friend group. That's the kind of thing that continues on all throughout life. And the motivations for wanting to be in change, but the concept kind of remains the same. There's some kind of exclusive connection or relationship or knowledge or even maybe advancement, toward greater salaries, more influence in in your workplace, whatever it is. There's something that is enticing you to this inner ring, wanting to be in the inside crowd. And it can lead to some really ugly things. And C.S. Lewis really kicks against this idea of wanting to be in the inner ring in his book. And he also illustrates, I think, how it's not an adequate reason to want to be somebody's friend. Any of those motivations I just mentioned. He mentions in this paragraph, I think, something that's really helpful in us identifying what friendship is not and what friendship should be pursuing. C.S. Lewis says in this paragraph of The Inner Ring, if you want to be made free of a certain circle for some wholesome reason, if, say, you want to join a musical society because you really like music, then there is a possibility of satisfaction. You may find yourself playing in a quartet, and you may enjoy it. But if all you want is to be in the know, your pleasure will be short-lived. The circle cannot have from within the charm it had with outside. By the very act of admitting you, it has lost its magic. Once the first novelty is worn off, the members of this circle will no more be interesting than your old friends. Why should they be? You were not looking for virtue, or kindness, or loyalty, or humor, or learning, or wit, or any of the things that can really be enjoyed. You merely wanted to be in, and that is a pleasure that cannot last. So really just wanting to be in, wanting to be one of that exclusive crowd that is in this inner ring is not an adequate reason to want to be friends or be a part of this group. There's these noble things that you could be pursuing in friendship. And that's really, I think, the first hint I wanted to make up toward what is a true friendship. What is something that's worth striving for in friendship? And he mentions virtue, kindness, loyalty, humor, learning, wit, all of these things that can actually be enjoyed. And actually, I would argue also would press you on to something greater than yourself. And so that's the direction we're going to go next with what is worth pursuing in friendship. This is really important, I think, because the scriptures talk about how friends, the ones we surround ourselves with, the people we hang out with all the time, are going to affect who we are. They're going to lead us into a certain way of living and a certain character in our lives that we may not even recognize ourselves after it's all done. Proverbs 1 warns against throwing in your lot with sinful companions, ones that are out to get others, to steal, to do things that are not wholesome. The Proverbs 13:20 says, "Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools suffers harm." Proverbs also talks about the wounds of a friend being faithful. And so even if a friend is willing to tell you when you're on a path that is dangerous to you, that is going to lead you into trouble, he's not going to just let you walk that path. He's going to say something. He's going to try to bring you back to the proper path. And so our friends should be those that we both want to imitate and become like, and those that are going to press us on to become someone better than ourselves. Now, we'll define that in a minute a little bit more of what is ultimately, what are you trying to be pressed toward? But we'll come back to that. Before we do that, we're going to go on to C.S. Lewis's work, The Four Loves. And in The Four Loves, one of the paragraphs I wanted to go to is kind of where C.S. Lewis is starting to kind of transition to more of what a friendship is, and but he's still kind of describing an aspect of what it's not. So he says, others again would say that friendship is extremely useful, perhaps necessary for survival to the individual. They could produce plenty of authority. Bare is the back without a brother behind it, and there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. But when we speak thus, we are using the word friend to mean ally. In ordinary usage, friend means or should mean more than that. A friend will, to be sure, prove himself to be an ally also when alliance becomes necessary. A friend will they will lend or give when we are in need, nurse us in sickness, stand up for us among our enemies, do what he can for our widows and orphans. But such good offices are not the stuff of friendship. So what he's saying is it's not merely an alliance. It's not merely, we're working toward this common end, and you're my partner in the battle here alongside. It's more than that. He goes on in a bit to say, when I spoke of friends, he had spoken of this before, as side by side or shoulder to shoulder, I was pointing a necessary contrast between their posture and that of lovers, whom we picture face to face. Beyond that contrast, I don't want the image pressed. The common quest or common vision, the thing you're all walking toward, basically, is what he's saying, is what unites friends and does not absorb them in such a way that they remain ignorant or oblivious of one another. On the contrary, it is the very medium in which their mutual love and knowledge exist. One knows nobody so well as one's fellow. Every step of the common journey tests his mettle. The tests are tests that we fully understand because we are undergoing them ourselves. Hence, as he rings true time after time, our reliance, our respect and admiration blossom into an appreciative love of singularly robust and well-informed kind. If at the outset we had attended more to him and less to the thing that our friendship is about, we should have not come to know or love him so well, our companion, our friend. You will not find the warrior, the poet, the philosopher, or the Christian by staring into his eyes as if he were your mistress. Better fight beside him, read with him, argue with him, pray with him. So what C.S. Lewis is saying in this passage is that your real friendship that is united by this common vision, this common end, this goal, and you're striving for it side by side together. That means you're going to press one another on. When one stumbles, you help them up, like Proverbs talks about there too. When you see your companions start to stray potentially from that path and aim toward that common goal, you're going to help them back onto the path. And you do it for one another. You mutually strive together. That's the kind of friendship that C.S. Lewis is saying is ideal. And in the sense of what is true and good and beautiful, ultimately it is a striving after God and after being Christ-like as image bearers of Christ. We talked about these things in the other lectures, in the previous lectures, that those are what we were made for. And as the best kind of friend is one that is helping you and that you're helping strive toward the end of becoming more Christ-like, pleasing the Lord, worshiping him more, really fulfilling our end as human beings made in God's image for his glory, and to enjoy his good gifts that he's given us. And that's where the other sides of friendship come in: humor, wit, good food, and enjoyment of hobbies together. All of those things are ultimately to be directed in glory and worship to God, thanking him for these good gifts that he's given, and we can enjoy them better together with companions and friends that also have that same vision of seeing this all be to God's glory. Even Aristotle, I mean, C.S. Lewis in Four Loves really draws a ton from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and particularly chapter 8, where Aristotle kind of turns a lot of his discussion to what a friendship is. And he says this that I think is really, really poignant and poetic, the way he puts it. He says, "By mutual confidence and mutual aid, great deeds are done, and great discoveries made. The wise new prudence from the wise acquire, and one brave hero fans another's fire." So you see how there's this mutual pressing on and gaining of wisdom in a friendship that is really pressing toward this greater good, these great deeds that are done, and the fanning of the fire within mutual friends is just helps you grow toward that end that we were made for. This is illustrated, I think, as well in Scripture. One of the most common probably friendships that you would think of in Scripture is David and Jonathan. That's kind of lifted up as a great example. I haven't heard this passage cited all that many times in that regard, but I think this illustrates what was just talked about in that passage and what C.S. Lewis is getting at here, and just what the Scriptures are saying in terms of pressing one another on. It's in chapter 23 of 1 Samuel, starting in verse 15. When David was being pursued by Saul, the king, whom he was to replace, actually, that God had told him he was going to be replacing Saul as the king. And Saul's son Jonathan, being Saul's son, would be the next in line for the throne, but he recognized that God had chosen David. He recognized God's will for David's life, and he loved David and was his friend, and he recognized in humility that that was God's purpose and submitted to that purpose. And as we'll see, that David was very, very blessed by that friendship with Jonathan. So 1 Samuel 23, verse 15, David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life. David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horesh. And Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horesh and strengthened his hand in God. And he said to him, "Do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father will not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Saul my father knows this." And the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. David remained at Horesh, and Jonathan went home. So you see how Jonathan recognized God's will for David and his will for himself. And he came and he strengthened David's hand in that, in his time of trial where he was being pursued. Saul, Jonathan's father, was trying to kill David. And he pressed David on to say, "No, you're meant to be king. This is going to happen. I'll be alongside you. I'm not going to seek to usurp your rightful place as God's chosen king." So friends of the best kind are not merely companionship. We need those kinds of friends too. Don't get me wrong and think that those are not worthy friendships. But we all need friendships that go deeper. They're not merely companionship. They're not merely useful or practical toward working together in the factory and accomplishing those things together, those practical things, business partnerships, those kinds of things. We need those relationships, but we need relationships that are deeper, friendships that go beyond these things. While those things may be a part of our friendships, our deepest friendships, most often they are, those are part of it as well. The deepest and most human friendships are those that most help another in their pursuit of what is good and what is virtuous, following the Lord ultimately, those that ultimately accomplish or help us accomplish the end for which we were created, to glorify God and to enjoy Him and worship Him forever. So thus, the friendship that challenges us to know God more, to live in right relationship with God, to love God more and love our neighbor more, and to enjoy these transcendent things, these things that go way beyond the here and now, the good, the true, the beautiful of God and His creation. Those are the truest and deepest sort of friendships. So next time, we're going to dive into a topic that I think is connected and related, but also is one that takes us a slightly different direction. Enjoying God's good gifts. The topic is hospitality and table fellowship. And this is a way that ultimately we can enjoy the good things God's given us together and press one another on, and really just be there for one another and have deep fellowship. We're made for those kinds of things. That's one of the universal cultural norms, is that table fellowship in some ways, the enjoyment of food together, and hospitality, at least to some degree or another, is a value in most cultures. So we'll look forward to talking about that with you next time, and hope you're blessed by our conversation about friendships. Thanks.